Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be painting just a quick little watercolor sketch of this onion. I'm going to be using only two colors. I'll be using burnt sienna, as you can see here, and then I'm going to add just a little bit more of this to my palette, even though I already have a bit, but you can kind of see where it's placed on my palette as well. And then the only other color I'll be using is Payne's Gray. And my goal here is just to keep things very, very simple. I only want to focus on two concepts, value and temperature. So that's why I chose the two colors that I did. My burnt sienna is going to be my warm color and my Payne's Gray is going to be my cool color. And I've got my favorite watercolor block here. Well, I should say new favorite because I just purchased this not too long ago, and I've really been enjoying using these. They were on sale, or at least the price had dropped on Amazon, so I bought a whole bunch of these little blocks. I think they're 5 inches by 7 inches, and they were pretty inexpensive, and it's 100% cotton paper, which I typically can't afford. So it's been really fun to use this, and I'm going to go ahead and get my paintbrushes into place here. I'm not going to use that last paintbrush that I placed, but you never know. I like to just have a couple of brushes handy. And I'm doing my little sketch with a colored pencil actually, which is something I think I'll do more of. I kind of like that, and I'm always really surprised that these marks don't really show through the watercolor anyway, but I actually wouldn't mind if they did. So I'm doing this little study of this onion. This is my onion. I'm very proud of it, although I did not grow it. I just think it's a really nice onion, so I did a little photo shoot with this model onion before I diced it up to do some cooking. And I really like how it's a very simple color. It's kind of one color, but it has some interesting textures to it, and you can really see the effects of light and shadow and form. So I thought that this would be a really good study, and because the coloration is so simple, I think it really lends itself to doing kind of a value study with just a cool and a warm. So I'm going to go here and just kind of mark in where I think that my darkest shadow shape is going to be, and then where my lightest highlight is going to be, so that I can make sure to leave plenty of white. I'm going to start out with my largest brush here to do the initial washes, and I'm going to be pretty carefree all the way through with this painting. Probably just here thinking about how I'm going to make sure that I preserve my light area. Something that I know that I struggle with is this first wash when I'm just going over a lot of white paper. It's really hard to gauge whether this initial wash is going to be too dark or maybe even too light. But, you know, I think that a great thing about just doing a sketch where there's no pressure and you don't have to care about how it turns out is that you kind of get to experiment with things like that. So I'm being careful here just to leave a little bit of white. I'm going to have just a tiny bit of a white remaining on my paper, but that highlight area will actually be larger. That lightest wash that I put in will eventually just become part of the outer highlight. There's probably a technical term for the area surrounding that very, very small glint of a highlight. I guess I'm calling it the outer highlights. So now I'm just going in with a little bit more saturation, keeping this very simple. Right now this is just my burnt sienna. So I'm not doing a lot of mixing between the Payne's Gray and the burnt sienna just yet. And then I'm going to go ahead and block in where the shadow is, and I really went in strong with that Payne's Gray. I honestly didn't mean to, but it, you know, as you know, watercolor tends to lighten as it dries, so I'm not going to be too worried about that. And then the other nice thing about this composition is that we really have this warm and cool contrast. Overall, the onion is very warm, and then this background, which is actually just a sheet, is very cool. So I can just kind of separate the subject from the background, even just in terms of temperature, whereas this entire background is relatively cool. And then the mid-tones and the lighter values of the onion are going to be very warm. And I really enjoy this stage of watercolor painting where everything is very wet and soft and it's kind of a blurry mess. And I'm actually painting without my glasses, which I typically don't do, but I guess it can help unless you get a headache from not wearing your glasses. I was fortunate not to get a headache, but sometimes that does happen. But I had actually just put like a face mask on my face, and I wanted to paint, but I didn't want to get face mask all over my glasses, so I think it ultimately helped me just to work faster because I didn't want to be staring into bright lights and focusing on something without my glasses for too long. So I guess it kind of helped. It put a little bit of an interesting constraint on my working circumstances, and I think that it helped me ultimately. So I went in with just kind of a pretty light wash throughout the entire background. Everything right now is still very soft, and actually throughout this painting I really don't take any breaks to let this dry. And one thing that I'm not used to, because I typically use a paper that is 25% cotton and then the rest is synthetic, I'm not used to the paper staying wet this long. I'm used to it drying a little bit quicker so that I can go in and start adding a little bit more structure to my design, but this time I pretty much worked wet into wet the entire time, which was interesting. I think that actually helped me because even with watercolor, and as much as I try to stress kind of just loosening up and being very fluid, letting the water do its thing, it's hard, you know, especially when I'm doing a study. And if you've seen some of my botanical paintings, you might know that I really love getting into like detail and texture, but a lot of that has to be done when the paper is dry, like bone dry. And so I didn't get to do that this time, and I think that I might end up doing a more thorough painting, like a more finished painting of this onion, so that I can really get into those details, because I really enjoy that. It's almost kind of like a meditation for me to be able just to get completely engrossed into the process like that. But for a study and reminding myself that I'm keeping it very simple and I'm focusing only on value and temperature and not on all those other things, helped me to just kind of stay focused and work quickly and achieve my task here, which was very simple. I'm actually just trying to get warmed up to do lots of painting this weekend. I didn't get to do very much painting during the week this week. I just had a lot going on. I know that we all relate to that. And it's kind of a bummer, you know. I really try to separate my days into segments, I guess you'd say. You know, of course, the first part of my day is work. So I go to my job, and then I'm trying, and this week I did pretty good, but I try to, you know, go to the gym right after work. Because if I go home first, you know, forget it. I'm not going to make it to the gym if I go home first and see my cute little dogs. And then after the gym, that's when I try to paint. But of course I've got to, you know, make supper, clean the house, yada yada. And, you know, that's life, I guess. So it can be a challenge, but I think that just doing a quick little sketch like this, or like my plein air painting that I did the other day, that can be a really effective way of just getting in a little bit of painting time, even on really, really busy days. And honestly, if I just don't even have the mental capacity to do any painting, one thing that I find that I always can do is just kind of read one of my art books, of which I have many, and With a lot of them, actually with all of them, I think I can read them multiple times and learn new things every single time. And I've been meaning to do some book reviews on my channel, so I will be planning to do some videos where I review some of my favorite art books, and specifically watercolor books that I can recommend. So now I am trying to let the onion dry up at least a little bit here, and I'm working a little bit more on the background where some of the folds in the fabric are. Not really trying to focus too much on that. Certainly I'm not going to paint the floral pattern on the sheet. So I'm going to leave the background pretty simple. One thing I thought maybe I could try to do was to get that area toward the bottom of the onion where there's a little bit of crack in that outer skin of the onion. But I didn't really plan well enough for that, I think. So that's another reason why I want to do a more complete study of this onion. And now I'm just kind of wrapping things up. I did try to add just a little bit of texture to this stem here because I thought that was really interesting. Actually, that was the whole reason why I was so interested in this onion. Of course, it was a really nice shape and has a really nice color, but I really liked that part just kind of sticking out. I thought it made it look a little bit interesting, a little bit wonky and unique. And I love doing studies with, organic materials like vegetables or fruit, because overall the shape is really simple, and yet there's lots of different nuances to the form and to the coloration of organic things like apples, onions. I even have painted cabbage, which was more fun than it sounds. But you really get to just really study those nuances and focus in on them. And like I said, doing things like this, whether it's a quick sketch or a more thorough painting with a lot of details, I find it is just a good way to get warmed up if I'm not feeling very creative, so I can kind of work from a reference. And it's also just a really nice meditation. It always relaxes my mind to just paint something relatively simple and straightforward, but to then start noticing all those little subtleties. So I'm just checking it here and deciding that I will be done with it. I don't think there's too much more I could do with it without kind of overworking it at this point, because I've put so much paint on there and you could actually see how wet it still is. But it was an effective little study, and if you want to use my photo reference, I will be linking that below. It'll be free for you if you would like to give this a go. I highly recommend it, and I hope that you enjoyed. Have a great day.